is crazy. Right, exactly. And everybody knows it. And so,
Yeah.
like I said in the last life meeting, my big concern is that something gets proposed in town that will not pass. And then we're back to square one, and there's no progress, and there's all kinds of buildings and angst amongst the residents. So what if?
Right.
Everybody loses. Everybody.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much for everybody coming out on this beautiful Saturday afternoon to learn more about some potential options for a public safety complex facility here in Warren. So I want to thank everybody for coming out this afternoon and giving their time to learn about this very important initiative that is being put forward as a conversation. I also want to thank Steve Duff in the Quabog Regional School Committee for allowing us having building access today, as well as WCAT 6, Travis and Company, for carrying this live on the cable access channel, as well as it will be recorded for future viewing purposes on YouTube. Today, we're going to continue our conversation. I am joined here today by Chair of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Richard Ihocker. The other two members of the Board of Selectmen, unfortunately, have family commitments. They have young school-age kids, and they cannot be here this afternoon, but they will be reviewing this presentation in the future. I'm also joined here today by our police and fire chiefs, Chief Jerry Millette of the Police Department and Chief Adam Lavoie of the Fire Department. We're also joined here on the dais by the principal architect and author of this study, Jeff McAway from Tecton Architects, as well as Ben Oglesby, who's the town's financial advisor. Myself, I'm Jim Ferreira. I'm your town administrator, who has been coordinating this project at the request of the Board of Selectmen. So as I had mentioned here in the beginning, this is the continued community conversation piece on a proposed public safety complex. This is our third conversation that we've had. We set up 3 meetings. We started these meetings back in April of this year. We had one in June, and then one this afternoon in September here. This conversation is meant to bring information to you, the public, as well as for us to gather information from some of your comments and questions and concerns that you have about what is being proposed. Let me stress, and I cannot stress this enough, this is a very fluid discussion. Fluid meaning things can change, options can change, the proposal can be modified. This is to gain information and to have a discussion. What got us here today was a grant that I had applied for, as well as a use of some ARPA funds to commission a public safety complex feasibility study. That was the core, and that was the scope that was put out there as part of this grant in using these funds. This was a directive by the Board of Selectmen to get this done, and this cost the taxpayers nothing because it was funded by grants in federal funds. So what got us here today was this study, and since we've released this study, we've gotten some feedback, we've gotten some questions, and some of the presentation that you're going to see here this afternoon has changed based on the feedback that we have gotten and we have received, and it may continue to change. So I also want to stress that there's no imminent vote on this. There's no ballot initiative that's imminent. This is, again, in the early stages of a feasibility study that is going to inform the public on a discussion of a public safety complex. Maybe it's not a complex. Maybe it's just a police station. Maybe it's a police station with some additions to some existing fire department buildings. Maybe it's some renovation at the fire department buildings. There are some additional options that you're going to hear today that weren't talked about at the first 2 meetings, but have since evolved since the discussion we had, the initial discussion that we had back in April. So again, this is very fluid, and we're here to listen to you, the residents and the voters, about this. And I do want to emphasize, this public safety initiative or police station has been talked about since 1991 in this town. And I think that this is one of the closest mile markers that we've gotten so far in this discussion in trying to be as inclusive and transparent as possible with bringing the voters in the town different options and different topics for conversation to engage the public. Nothing is set in stone. Jeff is not a developer. He is not a builder. He commissions these studies. He's an architect. He comes up with a probable cost. Ben is not a loan officer. He is somebody that can talk about the financial impact that it could happen to the towns and its taxpayers. So these are all different things that we're trying to get this information out to the public so that ultimately, if and when it does come for a vote, you will have all the information that you need to make the most informed decision. We're here to lay out options for you and for you to make the decision. We're not here to editorialize or try to persuade you in any way, shape, or form. We're here to give you the information so that ultimately, hopefully, you can make an informed decision. Where we got here today was based on months of analysis that Jeff worked with both the police and fire departments on a needs assessment and a space needs assessment analysis. What you're going to see here today is based on the needs of the department, the current needs of the department today, plus allows for future expansion and growth. So we're not back here in 10 or 15 years saying we ran out of room or we need more space or these buildings are not working for us. So we're trying to plan for the future, but also be fiscally responsible with the taxpayers' money. So I hope that you enjoy this community conversation, and I hope that we can get some good questions, and we'll try to answer them the best we can. And also, moving forward, if you have any other additional concerns or questions about this after the fact, please feel free to email myself, and we will get those answered to you through the Board of Selectmen. Okay? This presentation can be found, the slides can be found on the town's website at www.warren-ma.gov. It's right on the home page under news, as well as you can pick up a copy before you leave or right when you enter this auditorium. Just as a matter of housekeeping, Steve Duff has opened up the bathrooms on the closest bathrooms over to the right as you come in, right out here, and also the bathrooms around the corner here, which is also handicap accessible. So thank you very much, and I would like to turn it over to Jeff from Tecton Architects.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to set back up here again so we can dig into this. I have a question for everybody out here first. And with due respect to the folks viewing at home, how many of you have been to one of the prior conversations? All right, so I don't know, 40% maybe have been to a prior conversation. So we are going to visit some of the topics that we talked about before. I'm going to try to move through those a little bit more quickly. Because we have a lot of different options that have come out of the conversations, and I'd like to spend a little bit more time on those. So with having said that, things that we're going to look at today, we're going to give the two chiefs an opportunity to talk about some of the challenges that they have with their current facilities. We'll do a very high-level review of the programming exercise. That's the space needs assessment that Mr. Ferreira talked about. We'll review the current conceptual plans. Those are the ones that were included in the study, along with the opinion of probable cost for again, these are not estimates, but these are basis from experience on what these projects might cost. And then this is the important part. I'd really like to dig into some options that have come up through these conversations that we'd like to explore and present to this group. And then finally talking about what are the next steps. So with that, Ben, could I ask you to hand that microphone down to the two chiefs? So chiefs, here's your chance. Tell us about the challenges with your current facilities.
So, Chief Millette for the PD. For the PD side, obviously we know our building, it's old and has structural problems, mold, asbestos, rodents. But police-wise, security-wise, it's a nightmare. We have no secure parking for anything. In the past, I've had BBs shot at my car. Storage for evidence, it's not proper. We have no cells for prisoners. Prisoners use the same bathrooms as the officers. We have no sally ports, which poses an issue when we arrest somebody that's unruly, we'll say. We have to drag them from Milton Old Fountain Way up 4 stairs and put them on a bench and hope that we can strap them onto that. We have heating and cooling issues. Obviously, that's a nightmare. Our IT room is a little room that I have a box fan on the floor to try and keep the server cool, which isn't very good, but it works. Handicapped access is an issue. They have no break room. They have a little microwave in the room where they work in with all the computers to eat. Bench. Am I missing anything that you can think of now? Just operation-wise, just as a PD, it is hard. Like I said, heating and cooling. During summer, the bathroom is 100 degrees, and we have you'll see the window air conditioners in, so we cool each room individually. And there's only one thermostat that does the whole building, so that room will be warm. The other rooms will all be freezing. So we have issues like that. And I'm going to hand it over to Adam.
Thank you. As Jim said, thank you all for coming today. We really do appreciate your participation in this process. For those that have offered feedback and those that will offer feedback in the future, we thank you for that too. We're trying to find a solution that works best for this town. I promise you that. Nobody's here to, burden the taxpayers. We really aren't. Okay, we're looking for solutions to some of these problems. In terms of the fire department, we currently have 2 fire stations. Our headquarters and our administrative offices are located at 1012 Main Street here in Warren, and our substation in West Warren is located at 20 Albany Street. If you haven't been to the stations and seen them in person, they're both approximately 75 years old. They're relatively a similar layout with a bay system below and some space above that for break rooms and kitchens and things like that. We do the best we can with these stations. We maintenance them as well as we can, but again, these are 75-year-old buildings. The biggest issue that we face with the fire department is we are out of space. There is no more space in these buildings to put equipment. It's getting harder and harder to walk around the apparatus because these apparatus are getting bigger every time we bought one. We just took delivery of our newest tanker truck just this week. It has, probably haven't seen it yet because we're in the process of training on it. This was a 4-year project that has finally come to fruition, and we just took delivery of that. That truck had to be custom ordered because it was getting put down at Station B. The doors down there especially are a challenge. They're 10-foot doors, but there's an incline, so it requires us to order these trucks and these apparatus with very specific height restrictions, which is very tough. Most modern-day fire stations have 14-plus foot bays. These are 10-foot bays. So we're very limited as to what we can do with those. There is currently no sleeping locations at either one of the stations, which is becoming an increasing challenge for us because we're having more severe storms all the time where we have to, have people stay sometimes for prolonged periods of time. So all of these things are addressed in modern-day facilities with what we would need for our modern-day needs. There is limited in problems with handicap access to both buildings. Currently, people cannot access the second floor if they're handicapped. There's no elevators or provisions for that. So both of those buildings have the same issues when it comes to that. Times have changed as well. The reason why Station 2 existed was primarily because Rice was there and the downtown area and the River Street apartments and people worked there and everything, so we needed a substation. Well, unfortunately, those times have changed. Our employees have shrunk, our staff has shrunk. We don't have nearly as many call firefighters as we once did. And what that has done is it's made us put all of our staff up at our headquarters. So we currently don't have anyone operating out of the station in West Warren. It's all specialty equipment. We have a tanker down there. We have a brush truck. We have a small boat. We have an RTV unit, which we use for brush fires and rescues of people in the woods, things like that. The problem is that we have to now go down and get that equipment anytime we need it, all right? Firefighters have to report to Station A, get their gear, go down to Station B, get that equipment. It'd be much more ideal to have all of that equipment in one spot accessible, to the firefighters at any time. So those challenges, are hopefully something that we can overcome with some sort of a solution or a modification to these plans. But again, we're open to any and all suggestions and comments. And I think that in this presentation, you'll see a lot of that stuff that's been happening behind the scenes to find some sort of a solution that isn't as expensive as necessarily first proposed. So I would welcome anyone that would like to come down and see the stations. Please let me know. Stop in. We have an open door policy. Let me know. I'll be happy to walk you through, take you through, and you can actually see everything for yourself. So thank you.
Thank you, Chiefs. Appreciate that. Just really briefly, programming. It's been pointed out to me a lot recently that when we use the word programming, a lot of people don't know what we're talking about. I had one client that thought we were doing something with computer programming as part of this exercise, but in the architecture world, programming is really the name that we use for the space needs assessment, and that's the exercise where we sit down with our client and we talk about their current spaces and their future needs for space. We talk about the potential for future growth in their organization. We talk about things that they don't have that they wish they had or that they really need to have, and then we put all those comments together into a list of rooms and spaces, and we assign the square footages based on what we heard in those discussions. And so we did this exercise with the fire department, with the police department, and initially with town offices as well. When we initiated the study, there was a possibility of including all three of those elements into a single solution. So if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see if we do a fire and police building combined, the total gross square footage came out to about 26,500 square feet. I'm sorry, I said that incorrectly. If we do a standalone fire building and a standalone police building, it comes to 26,545. If we combine them together and share some space between the two departments, then we cut that down to about 25,400 square feet. So we save a little over 1,000 square feet in things that they can share with one another. Conventionally we thought, okay, well, if you save some square footage by combining police and fire, would you save more square footage combining police, fire, and town offices? And that exercise didn't result in quite the expectation. So if we did a standalone fire building, a standalone police building, a standalone town offices, based on the space needs discussions, we would have come up with a total gross square footage of 41,000, almost 42,000 square feet. When we combined them together, it only came down to about 40,185 square feet. And that has to do with some of the complications of secure areas and really just getting the flow to work and be able to support all of those functions together. We didn't get as much sharing opportunity in that combined facility. I think about that time when we were looking at those gross square footages, that's about the time where we started talking about maybe this project was more about public safety and not about town offices. So any future considerations that we did no longer included the town office component. So from there on, we started looking at sites. And for those of you that were here for the very first presentation, you got the pleasure of seeing the long list of sites that we took a look at. We're only showing the conceptual designs, the final 3 in this presentation. If you want to see more, the study is on the website. You can see all of the various different sites we looked at and a lot of the description of why some of those didn't really work out. A lot of them had to do with topography. So the first site we looked at was 87 and 0 Brimfield Road, which is right next to the Department of Public Works. And as I drove by today, I see that they've got some equipment out on the potential site that we were looking at. So we're taking advantage of that available area right now. But the idea was that we would put a new public safety building right next to the Department of Public Works and try to keep them separated. There was a little bit of wetlands concerns that we had out there, and we walked the site with a wetland scientist and discovered that we did have some latitude to redevelop some areas that are essentially drainage basins, so that freed up some space for us. But the idea here is that we would orient the offices and living quarters in a 2-story volume running this, making sure my mouse is showing, is it? It is not. All right, where the words new public safety facility are, that would be the 2-story volume with the police department primarily downstairs with a common public entry, and then the fire department offices and living quarters upstairs. The bar of the building that extends down to the lower left is where the apparatus bays are, and these bays would be accommodated, built to accommodate both fire stations, so the main headquarters and the substation. There's also support facilities that go along with that. And you can see that we arranged parking around the 35-space parking lot, which has some public spaces right near the front entry. That was where one of those drainage basins are that we determined that we can relocate. And then the other thing we wanted to focus on is trying to get drive-through apparatus space for the fire department. That gives them more options in response. You can respond, one vehicle after the other out the front, or you can arrange vehicles in opposite directions so that larger vehicles go out the front and smaller ones go out the back to improve your response time. One of the things that did come out of this is we are encroaching a little bit on the material storage area of the DPW facility. And so you can see at the very top of that, we expanded that material storage area as part of that by cutting into the hillside a little bit. I'm going to keep the floor plan discussion high level, but right now you're looking at the main floor plan. And again, there's a common entry of that vestibule bump over on the left-hand side. That's where the main entry is. There's a lobby that gets us to all the police functions that we need to interact with records and the main desk. There's a combined training room off of that lobby that serves both police and fire and can serve for community use. And then if you continue down and wrap up, then you can go upstairs. And all of our fire department spaces are upstairs, with the exception of the very back there. There's a couple shared spaces, the fitness room, the day room, break room, and then, of course, there's a fire alarm simulator off the very back, way at the top of that drawing. That is currently housed in the town hall, so in this scheme, we were relocating it to the public safety building. And, of course, you can see the apparatus space and the sports spaces over on the right-hand side of this slide. This was a quick image of what that might look like, just giving a sense of that 2-story mass and how you might create an aesthetic for that site. We also looked at 48 High Street and 100 Maple Street. There is a property associated with this solution that right now has a house that had burned down or was badly damaged in fire. So this would require the acquisition of that property. So here, if we look at it, that house sits down where that parking lot down on the lower right-hand corner is. But basically, you see the town office building with its circulation running around, and then there's an open field to the right of that, and then expanding that into that acquired property. That would give us our public safety facility. You can see the opportunity. We can do the drive-through apparatus space again. The configuration of this facility is very much the same. In fact, it's exactly the same as the floor plan that we looked at in the last scheme. But again, we're going to get some responder parking down in that lower right-hand corner. One of the things we talked about, the roadway that loops in front of the houses up to Maple Street is very tiny, and it's not really suitable for emergency response, so we did want to try to connect to Maple Street in an area that was more suitable for response. There is a concern on the fire department side that although we did create a better exit access to Maple Street, that when they make a right-hand turn, that they will immediately be climbing a hill. And that's a big deal when you got an 80,000-pound fire truck and it's trying to accelerate, pulling a load full of water. That does slow down your response time a bit. And again, it is the exact same floor plan as in the other site. And oddly enough, the same aesthetic. The other site that we looked at is 0 Old West Warren Road. That's a hayfield right now. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. One of the things that we discovered when we first looked at the site, I saw what looked to me like a little bit of wetlands right along the roadway, right along Main Street. As we investigated a little bit further, we discovered that that wetland is a little bit more extensive than we thought. You can see that highlighted blue area is the extent of that wetland. And we do have to maintain certain buffers. We had conversations with the Conservation Commission, making sure that we were trying to respect that. And in fact, with this particular scheme, one of the comments was they would like us to increase the buffers to that wetland a little bit further than what we showed here. So in this concept, we were, again, with the bar where it says new public safety facility, that's the piece that holds the police station on the lower floor and the fire station on the up floor. This one's a little bit unique because this site does climb up. We pick up about, 45, 50 feet from Main Street to Old West Warren Road behind. And so the police station, you enter at grade level, but the fire station essentially sits on top of it and expands up the hill. So the offices and living quarters of the fire department are on top of the police station, but the apparatus bays are on the hill behind. So once again, we were able to achieve drive-through apparatus bays, but we did have these concerns lingering about the proximity to the wetland. So really quick, this is the lower level with our police facility. The entry is over on the lower right-hand corner where the bump is, just above the word plan. A similar arrangement with that shared lobby that gets us into the police station with all of its services to the left, the shared training room, and then access upstairs to the fire department. You can see the fire department office and living quarters sitting on top of the police station element below. That's that gray roof that you see. And then, of course, the apparatus space continuing on up the hill. And once again, just a rendering quickly of what that could look like. A little bit less brick in this one, a little bit more conventional materials. But as a result of the concerns about the wetlands and the conversation with the Conservation Commission, we did want to go back and revisit that site plan a little bit. And so what we ended up doing is taking some of the smaller equipment, the smaller vehicles that the fire department use, and turning them into a leg of apparatus bay, and thereby reducing our bays by one bay and adding a little bit of garage space on the back of the property. What that enabled us to do was to increase our buffer zone, again, that shaded blue wetland area, to the distance that was requested by the Conservation Commission. It does push us closer up to Old West Warren Road. And again, because of the grade change, Old West Warren Road sits up here. The floor of the fire station sits down here, so the back wall of that is going to be retaining wall. And then the floor of the police station steps down. So the building is literally stepping down that hill. So now we took a look at the costs, and this is a two-part exercise that we do. Let's talk a little bit first about what's included in the number. First is the construction cost. This is the piece that we actually use an outside estimator, consultant that does cost estimating all the time. And basically, this is the cost of that when you go out to bid and you get a contractor, this is the number we want to see back from them. That's their construction cost. It's all the brick and mortar and the studs and everything, and it's based on Massachusetts' prevailing wage rates. Also associated with that is all of the cost it takes to develop the project. That does include professional architectural engineering fees. It involves materials testing and inspections. It's the cost for furnitures, fixtures, and equipment that go inside each of these buildings. It's got communications equipment. It's the cost of bidding and the reprographics associated with that. It has any relocation costs, so moving stuff from one existing station to the new station, and any utility company back charges and insurance. This is not the result of cost estimator. This is actually from historic data that we have on the magnitude of these costs relative to a project size. And then the third piece is your project contingencies. Every project has to, when you're going public bid, has to have a contingency for all the unforeseens that might come up if we get a surprise in the soil or a surprise during construction. But also that covers you for the cost of escalation, and also for making sure that you have the ability to fine-tune the design as you go through the construction process. All of those together is your total all-in cost for the project. So the numbers we're showing you are not just construction costs, it's the total project, all in. Having said that, if we look at 87 and 0 Brimfield Road with a 25,400 square foot facility, we're looking at a construction cost of about $20.5 million. Our project development costs come in at about 3.8. Contingencies at about 1.2, so you'd end up with a total project cost of about $25.6 million, and that's assuming we start 16 months into the future with actual construction. Whoops. All right, here we go. On 48 High Street, that's the same matching floor plan, 25,400 square feet. We do anticipate a little bit of savings because we don't have to create that material storage yard for the DPW facility here. But then we also have a little bit of additional cost because of site acquisition and demoing of that existing building. So again, construction cost comes in at about 20.8, just shy of that. Project development costs at about 4.1, construction, development, and owner's contingencies at about, again, a little over 1.2. Total project cost, $26,132,000. And then the last one is our Old West Warren Road. It does match the square footage, although the floor plan is different. What we do anticipate on this site is to spend more money on site work because of the way the building has to step down the hill. We've got to do a lot more excavation on this site. So our construction costs came in at about $24.6 million. Project development at $4.8 million. Contingencies at just shy of $1.5 million. So the total project cost on this, the most expensive option, was about $30.9 million. We also did a part of the study. We did look at the liquidated the value of the existing properties, and you can see, down on the bottom there, it does include the town offices. But if you look at the lines for police and fire, you're looking at I don't know, $1.5, $1.6 million for the building value, and about $37,000 for the yard value. So at the end of the day, you're going to get a little bit back from the potential of sale on those buildings. But since we're not doing the town offices, you don't get that value back. That stays. We did a quick slide. This is the down and dirty slide, but Ben is here today, so we have the more detailed estimate. But just really quickly, this takes a look at the values based on different single-family house values. We can look back at this, but I think what I'd like to do is have Ben go through his charts, and then if we want to come back and look at this, we can. Ben?
Good afternoon. I'm Ben Oglesby from Unum Bank. Nice to be with you today. We wanted to kind of show you tax impact, looking at just a couple of assumptions here. The first one is I'll start over in the top left-hand corner. We use the current town's assessed value to make this calculation. It's about $577 million. We just kind of assumed a standard home value for the town, and you'll need to adjust based on your own personal circumstances, but we use 290,000 as our reference number. And importantly, there's no assumptions of growth in the future for your assessed valuation for the town. So just to kind of run you through this, for a level debt service, the payments would be around $2.1 million, which translates for a $100,000 home to about $365 per year. And for that $290,000 assumed value, we also ran a column to kind of show you what that $290,000 house annual tax bill would be. And that's assuming we were to finance the bond over 20 years. And I would encourage you to look at level debt service, because that's probably a better, that's more typical for these types of projects or what towns do. If the town wanted to, they could also decide to pay it off faster than what level debt service. And what happens is the payments are bigger at the beginning and get a lot smaller at the end. So you kind of take the pain up front, but over time, the town would pay less interest cost. So we can look at that. In this case, the bond payments for the town would start in year one at about $2.5 million, but at the end of a 20-year period, they'd be about $1.5 million. And that would start you at about $441 for a $100,000 house and end at about $269. And for that $290,000 house, it would start at $1,280 per year and end up at about $780. So just to kind of give you a feel for it. And this is the 25-year scenario. We did 20, 25, and 30. So on a 25-year scenario, that $100,000 house, it's about $320 a year. And I'll just ignore the equal principle. Yeah, let's look at level debt service. And if we were to do it over a 30-year period, and again, this is the $30 million numbers. This is on the higher end of what Jeff has been talking about. So for a $100,000 house, the annual cost would be about $300 a year. And for that $290,000 house, it would be about $870 a year.
So I'm just going to quickly back up. So we simplified it here with a series of different values at 200,000, 250, 300, 350. You can see again the 20-year, the 25-year, the 30-year, approximately what the payment would be on that value. I think this is the level debt service, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
That's on the highest proposal. That's on the most expensive proposal.
I understand that. I understand that, but I still think I think we need to understand on a different kind of level exactly what we're looking at as close as we can to what we're going to be facing as soon as we put this in. And then there's going to be something going on from the school, there's going to be need for more fire equipment, there's going to be this, that, and the other thing. So that number, what it is going to be piled on top of everything else that we're already doing. And the pressures that this town is already under. This is a very poor town. And I think we need to try to keep it more reasonable for the people in this town that have lived in this town all these years. I haven't seen the town growing a huge amount in the 50 years that I've lived in this town. We still
And I think that's very consistent with the feedback we heard during the last two sessions, which is why later on in this session, we're going to go back and explore what else could we do that maybe is a little bit more reasonable for the taxpayers. So we'll look at that a little bit in the future. I believe the gentleman in the back had his hand up.
Yeah, I'd like to know out of people that are sitting here, how many have done business inside the police station? Well, I've been in there myself, and I've seen rats on desks, I've seen moles. Jerry and his people need to get out of that building for health reasons alone. Somebody's gonna sick, and then we're gonna get a lawsuit. Mike does have a problem. He does need a few things. Why can't we all work together, give them what they want, Mike and Jerry, but let's get the cost down and work to get the cost. It's reasonable, because we do need fire and police. But the price, I agree with it, it's ridiculous now. I can't afford it. I'm on a fixed income. If this goes through with these kind of prices, it's a possibility I could lose my home. And I've lived there 40-something years, and I'll be out in the street. It's not right. But that woman is right. This town is a dying town. It's poor. We lost our Chrysler deal. We lost Perkins machine. We lost rights. All that money used to come into the town and make. And then another thing, we always never argue with the school system. We give them whatever they want. We got to put them on a budget because there's other things we need in the town. Like our roads got to be repaired. We need good firemen there. Jerry and Mike are doing a super job with what they got, but we got to change it. What can we do to get the cost down? Like you people that are proposing this building in the front, you're trying to get a big construction done. What you never show us something smaller, more reasonable that we can afford and get. We do need something, yes, but stop pushing big police stations like Lexington, Mass. We're not Lexington, Mass. We don't have that kind of money coming.
I understand, sir. And again, I want to point out that later in this presentation,
What do we do to work together to get Jerry and Mike what they need?
later in this presentation, we explore some options that do just that. So I just ask your patience, and after we look at those, maybe we talk about this again.
Mike, is it true now, when you get an ambulance call, right, and it's a serious heart condition, you've got to call in another ambulance from another town, so we don't have equipment to take care. Is that true, Mike?
Yes. It is. 2 bills.
Okay, Adam Lavoy, not Mike. That's okay. That's okay. So what you're referring to is the fact that we run a municipal ambulance service here. All right. There are different levels of EMT certification. Okay. There's EMTs basics. They're up into EMT paramedics. Okay. Paramedic is the highest level of care. And that is certainly something that's been brought up before. And it's certainly something that we would love to be able to provide the highest level of care. But there are certain protocols that we have to follow that on certain situations we are required to call and have a paramedic jump on board. We still bill. We still do all of that. You're not going to receive 2 bills. You're going to receive 1 bill from us, okay? That's still going to come from the town of Warren. The town of Warren is still going to be able to.
I have a bill. I used the ambulance service last September. I am still getting the bill. It's actually going to a collection agency from the town of Brookfield.
I can't speak to that, ma'am. If you'd like to come and see me about it, that would be perfectly fine, but you should be receiving a bill for us only, unless Brimfield took you for some reason. But okay, again, you're welcome to come down. Many people come down over bills. I'm more than happy to sit down with you and discuss it, and we can certainly straighten it out. I'm more than happy to do that. That happens quite a bit. You know, there are options for people to pay over time. There are options for people to abate that completely in hardship situations. So that's certainly something that we address on a regular basis. So for anyone that has that issue, but
What I'm trying to say, we want to build a big complex like this, but we don't even have it. There's other stuff to protect people when the ambulance for the heart. We should have that before we even think about a big building, no? Don't you think, Adam?
What I'm saying is we certainly can, and we can do that. I've already had those conversations and some of those conversations in the background to add that to our service, but that's not going to change the output or the building itself. Okay, these are 2 separate issues. All right,
Change on the buildings to bring the cost down for you and Jerry. I mean, Jerry definitely needs a new place. I'll back him up 100%. He needs it.
Yeah.
But I know you guys are working with what you got.
Yeah, we're doing the best we can, I assure you. That one thing,
Doing the best you can. No, but I understand you need improvements in trucks. You need bigger bays to put your trucks, put our equipment, and we pay for all this equipment, and it's out in the weather, and it gets ruined, it costs us more. So I understand. But what can we do to lower the cost to do this?
so you are gonna,
Adam, what I'm saying, let's do it, but let's get the cost up where the people of Warren, Massachusetts can afford it.
I totally understand. This is something we've heard over and over again, and that's why
Without going up in the property tax.
that we're going to have some options that we're looking at now in the very near future. Those are going to come out. We're going to discuss those. One thing I would like to say, okay, is that what I've heard from several residents over time is, well, the population's not increasing, okay? Nothing's changing, okay? The town is staying where it is and everything, and that is generally accurate, okay? That's just.
We had all this in there. We had a lot more tax money to play with here.
Yeah, we've had businesses closed, but what I'm trying,
Have a bank in the town no more.
what the point I'm trying to make is that I'm trying to get across to everybody here, is that yes, our population is relatively the same and it's been stagnant for years. The problem is that same population is calling us 2 or 3 or 4 more times than they ever did before. So we can't lose track of that, okay? Call volume is going up 12, 14, 15% every year, every single year, okay? So the residents of this town are requesting us more and more often for services. So we have to be able to provide those services, and that's been the challenge.
Adam, I want to give you all that. I want to give Jerry everything he needs, but at a cost that the town can afford.
Yeah, yep, and I understand it.
People are worried about their taxes. Can I keep my house, you know?
So we are, again, we have slides that are addressing that. And if the town, if you folks would like to, when we eventually get to a vote, and they decide they want to look at other options, we have some options for you. So if you just give us another few minutes, we'll get to those options, okay?
I just want to let the woman near the back there who's had her hand up for a bit.
It's getting tired.
Yeah, I see that.
I just want to say that my real estate taxes just recently went up, and as this goes through, obviously they're going to go up even more, and you're going to find that people are going to be leaving the town, and people are not going to come in because they're not going to pay that high value. So that's all I want to say.
So I'm gonna hit this slide really quick, and then we're gonna move on to options. I promise you. So this was just part of the last presentation. It answered the question: what if we do one today and one in 18 months, based on the same square footage? And particularly at the time of the earlier presentation, the very first presentation, we were in a very high escalation period in construction costs. That has tamed down substantially now, but still the escalation does add up. And so if you did one now and then the next 18 months later, you could get $2.5 million in additional costs by doing them one after the other at that square footage. What we're going to talk about now is options that are not at that square footage. So what options can we explore? And this is a series that Jim, through his dialogue with the select board and with various people through the community, asked me to take a look at for this presentation. They were not exercises that we did in our initial study, but you can certainly consider all of these options. And the first one is to build a reduced program police station. The first suggestion was to delete the firearms training simulator, which is already in the town hall. We just leave it there. The other one was to delete the fitness room and see what that does. So they'd have to use, fitness facilities elsewhere. Maybe it's a gym. I don't know the answer to that. But the idea is reducing the square footage, reducing the cost. The other possibility was the purchasing and renovating the bank building, the former Cornerstone Bank. I know we got the town got a letter from an engineer saying yes, you could change that and bring it up to code for police station. I think that's true. There's some other caveats I want to talk about with that, so we're aware. And then the most recent one is I had a conversation with Adam a couple of weeks ago about the possibility of using the basketball courts adjacent to the existing fire station to do an addition renovation project at a much less square footage, hopefully capturing the real core needs that he has. And I believe, Adam, you reached out to the Recreation Department, and it's at least a possibility. So I want to talk a little bit about that, and then we can have some conversations about where you guys feel this makes sense, and if you have any other ideas or options. So really quickly, if we did police station only, right next to the DPW, and you could do the same project next to the town office building, and I've got pricing both ways, but say it's the full program, which is just shy of 10,000 square feet. You can see that's a much smaller footprint in the public safety building. You can see I've arranged the parking around it, so we have public parking in front and staff and cruiser parking around the backs and sides. This has a much less impact on the overall site, and you get a much smaller police facility. This is the full program. This is not yet the reduced program. I'm going to show you that, okay? So at 87-0 Brimfield Road, using the numbers from our estimators, so I extrapolated these numbers, our construction costs would go down to about $8.5 million. Your project development costs would be $1.7 million. Your contingency would be about $500,000. So even at the full program, you'd be looking at a $10.8 million project. If we did that same project at 48 High Street, there's some additional cost for site acquisition, but there's also some savings because we don't have to replicate the material storage yard at the DPW. So for the same 10,000 square foot, approximately 10,000 square feet, you'd be looking at 7.9 for construction, 1.9 for development costs, and just shy of $500,000 for contingency. So you'd be looking at $10.3 million. So then, I didn't change the graphic here, but we said, okay, what happens if we get rid of the firearm simulator? That saves about 750 net square foot. This is a little trick of architecture I'm going to explain to you. Net square foot is the area from the face of that wall to the face of that wall, and the face of that wall to the face of this wall. When we calculate a building size, we calculate gross square footage. Because to get a room this big, you also need a hallway that runs by it, and you need the thickness of walls. So we add a percentage on top of the net square footage. So you're actually saving, by taking that 750 square foot room out of the program, you're saving over 900 square feet because of that gross adjustment that happens. So when we look at that, we drop down to 8,900 square feet. Your construction cost goes to $7.7 million. Your development cost at $1.6. Again, your construction contingency drops. You're looking at a $9.8 million project just by taking the firearm simulator and leaving it where it is today. And if we do that same project over on 48 High Street, 100 Maple, you're looking at about 9.3, the same reasons I talked about before. So that's to go to the next step. We take out the fitness room, same general floor plan. Our square footage goes down again. We end up at about 8,380 square feet. Our construction cost goes to 7.3. Our development costs go to 1,564,000, and our contingency is about 443,000. So now we're looking at a $9.3 million construction project at 87-0 Brimfield Road. And over at 48 High Street, it comes out to about $8.8 million. So I heard the Lexington comment. I used a presentation at the last one that was explaining best practices, and people didn't react because I had pictures of Lexington. So I did want to show you a couple of examples of police facilities that are more in the scale of what we're talking about. This happens to be over in North Brookfield. I did this project 17 years ago, I think it was, I think about 17 years ago. This is about a 10,000 square foot police station. I wish we could build it today at the same cost we spent 10 years or 17 years ago. This one went for about $3.5 million. That's the change in construction costs over the last 17 years. We're looking at almost just shy of 10 million for this same project today. This one is another smaller station over in Dayton, Massachusetts. This was about 8,500 square foot, so very similar to your smaller program. I don't recall the exact number on this, but I think it was in the $8.5 million range. This goes back probably a decade, maybe a little over a decade or so ago. So this is, a very simple, conventionally framed, modest station for a modest community. The next one that Jim asked me to take a look at was the former Cornerstone Bank. And I have not been in this bank. It was not part of my scope to study this in the original exercise. And I did get a copy of the property card, which helped me understand a little bit. And I did some work on GIS to understand the site that's available. So the building is just over 11,000 square feet over 3 floors, including the basement, which is big enough for your program. It is a bank building. It is a wood frame building with brick veneer on the outside. Previously, I was afraid that it was going to be an all masonry building. So that does help to the engineer's comment that wrote the nice letter there, that yes, that does reduce the cost of bringing it up to an emergency services facility. There's still some cost. You know, I would think about this cautiously. It's worth taking a look at and doing some further study on. I would be concerned about, are there any hazardous materials in there? A lot of older buildings have those. I'm a little bit concerned about how we deal with jail cells on a wood floor. I think we're probably going to have to do some changes there. ADA issues probably still apply. I'm not sure what condition the mechanical systems are. So I can't tell you today. Oh, by the way, there's the aerial that I got off of GIS. There's about 10 parking spaces on site. Police department was looking for, in their future plan, enough space for 16 for cruisers and staff. This is with future growth. So I did point out that the same lot that they're using across from the old town hall is still right across from the bank building. So you still have that option available to you. But I can't tell you exactly what the cost is because we haven't had engineers in there. We haven't done a study. We haven't done hazardous material investigations. We haven't come up with a floor plan. So I'm going to tell you that certainly this is way less than that $26 million public safety project. It is police only. I have found, and this is, please listen to what I'm saying very carefully. I have found that a lot of times using old existing buildings for police stations can cost very similar to new construction. And that's because of the way the codes have changed. This is not always true. Sometimes you get a great building and it works out great. I've not been in this. I don't know. It's just something that we've experienced, 40 years of doing police facilities. So, I would say that you could study this. I threw a number of about $55,000 to do a full conceptual plan, do some investigation, get some engineers in there understanding what it looks like. But arguably, this would be somewhere in the neighborhood, I think, of the all-in police station cost, maybe a little bit more.
Jeff?
Yes, sir.
Yep. If I could, to put it into a different perspective, you may have seen in the news reports the town of Ware, I believe it was last year or maybe the year before, recently was in talks of acquiring a country bank location, and they were going to put some town offices within that country bank. They decided not to do that because it was cost prohibited. After they did their study, after they did their analysis, it was just too costly of a project. So that's what Jeff's talking about. So when we're looking at, a potential option, if it works out, great. If it doesn't, that's the reason why, because the costs are just too far when you can be getting a new building for virtually almost about the same cost. So that's just the caveat off of Jeff's thing. And this is for a study. This would be for a study that would have to be paid for, and we would have to get an appropriation in order to get this looked at.
I had an opportunity to speak to Mr. Fountain yesterday in front of the bank building, and I asked him some questions. He couldn't be here today, but I put on my phone what he told me. He told me that he's looking for $550,000 for that building. He understands that there's a study, and he told me that he would be willing to, he thought the study would be about $50,000
Yeah, I drove by today. It is very lovely.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Again, this would require us to have an appropriation at a town meeting. We would have to get funds, and a proper study would have to be done on that property. That is a potential option.
So those were some options that we developed on the police station side of the equation. We also, I was asked to develop a couple different options, cost-saving options on the fire side of the equation. So we talked about if I did a fire station with the full program on the DPW without the police station, the footprint ends up being very much the same as what I showed you before for the public safety building, except now it's all one story. And again, if you look at the cost, you're looking still at about a $16.8 million. And I show this because I wanted a basis for comparison of the next options. So fire station full program, fire station only full program would be about $16.8 million. I was asked what happens if we took off one bay. So the bays are about 66 feet deep out to out and about 16 foot 8 inches wide. So I added up the square footage, did the net to gross calculation, and just by deleting one bay, we save about $15,183. And again, the next slide is in the spirit of the comments about Lexington. This happens to be a fire substation our firm did over in Bloomfield, Connecticut. This is a $12 million project, all new construction. I'm going to share a really quick story here. This is the second station I did in Bloomfield, Connecticut. I did one at the start of my career for a different firm about 30 years ago. And when I was at the ribbon cutting ceremony, they dedicated the building to this former fire chief of the department. The former fire chief of that department is now one of my project managers, and this station replaces the one that his grandfather was the fire chief of. So I let him do this one because it was his family. So that's a cool story. The other one that we looked at was this is the one I talked about earlier, where Adam and I had the conversation about if we were able to capture the basketball courts. We haven't done a study on this yet. But we're assuming that maybe we could capture a couple bays where the basketball courts are and maybe put some space over it to get some training room. We still have to look at a lot of those existing conditions. We get a little bit of latitude because it is already a fire station. It depends on how much we renovate, whether we trigger full code compliance or not. So again, I don't know enough to tell you what that'll cost, but if I added another bay and some space on top of it, we double the size of that station and hopefully gather some of the very core program elements that the chief needs from combining the assets over at the substation with the headquarters. And so, a study for that comes in a little bit lower at about $48,000. I would expect, as long as we don't have any big surprises, that you could see a substantial savings from that $16.8 million brand new construction on this site. And here's an example. This is another not Lexington station. This happens to be over in Wilbraham, Massachusetts. The fire chief apparently they had on their schedule to get a new ladder truck, and it was going to be about $1.5 million they were going to need for their new ladder truck. And he went to the select board and said, the ladder truck I got still working fine. What I really need is a bigger building. And so they hired us to do a study, and they had us do full programming. And then they asked us, okay, what can we afford for $1.5 million? And so we drew up a floor plan and showed them what they could afford for $1.5 million. And the select board looked at it and said, well, that's nice, but it doesn't really get him everything he wants. How much would it cost to give him the full program? And so we went back and redesigned the floor plan and came up with one that gave him his full program. The piece in the middle where the Wilbraham Fire Department sign is, that's the existing building. The piece to the left, the piece to the right, and the piece to the back are the new addition that wraps all the way around it. This again goes back about 16 and a half years. This was about a $3.3 million project back then. You can't get that today. But still, it was in a very effective reuse of an existing, very simple fire station where we put additions and renovations and were able to capture the programmatic need for that fire department. Later on, they came back and we did the police station right next door, which was another great opportunity of getting them co-located adjacent to one another. So, Ben, it's back to you. I get to take a breather.
Okay, so we used, in this case, based on the numbers that Jeff just provided, the lower numbers, we ran $9 million for 25 and 30 years. So same assumptions as before, the same assessed valuation for the town. We did not assume any growth in the assessed valuation of the town over future. We also assumed a $290,000, just as an idea of a typical home value. And so what we have here is, and I'll just direct your attention to the level debt service piece, because I think that's the way most people think about this. So if you were to borrow $9 million over 25 years at current market interest rates, the payments would be about $590,000 a year on the bonds. To put that in terms of a $100,000 house, it's about $102 a year. Okay, so divide that by 4 if you're paying quarterlies. For that $290,000 hypothetical house, it's about $300 a year. So again, divide that by 4, so that's $75 every quarter, okay? And over here, I don't want to get into this too much, but if the town wanted to accelerate the principal repayment, we could do it differently, and it would save the town money, but I think it's just easier to look at this number here, because I think these numbers are easier to kind of make your own calculations.
And then, Ben, I've got your 30-year here as well.
Yeah, let's look at the 30-year. Again, I think I discussed this before at a prior meeting. The state of Massachusetts allows towns to borrow up to 30 years for these types of projects. And I would be, especially for new construction, 30 years is not an unreasonable amount of time to borrow money for a building. So I think 30 years is a perfectly valid assumption to make. So with that same $9 million over 30 years, the yearly payment per 100,000 is about $95. And for that $290,000 house, it's about $275 a year. That's for $9 million, however you spend it.
That would be $9 million for one of the police stations that was mentioned.
All right, so, what comes after this? Obviously, if there's a decision to explore one of these options or even a different option, then there might be a potential funding for expanded studies. Ultimately, based on the feedback of the community, the select board will choose a single site or design option or not, and potentially bring that for a future town meeting and ballot question. But that, I think we're still in this discovery phase, and the decision to do that has not yet been made, and we'll see. We'll see if it is a decision that gets made in the best interest of the community overall. So with that, if you want to react to any of the options, if you want to throw out any other options, if you want to, share any thoughts about, where you think the town ought to appropriately invest money or not, we'd love to hear about that right now. So please.
I'm Barbara Larkin from 35 High Street, and I have very grave reservations about putting a complex site on the 48 High Street side. It is a very nice residential area. It would lower our property values. It would create a lot of noise and disturbance 24/7, and it just seems completely out of bounds of where you should put a complex. In addition, some of the things that you mentioned, which would be the access of fire and safety personnel on Hitchcock Avenue would be prohibitive. You couldn't put a fire engine could not go down that road. In addition, coming off on the other exit that you proposed onto Maple Street is a disaster waiting to happen. There are so many trucks that get stuck on that curve. I've lost count of that, but also it goes up a hill. It would be very hard for fire engines to gain speed at that point in time. And then returning would also be a problem as well. But despite that, any part of the complex proposal, I think, would be very difficult on that part of town.
Thank you. So those are the exact points I brought up for that location. So, obviously, that's why we had to propose a different access point, because we all know Hitchcock Ave would not be doable for us. So that's why we had to come up with that, but I share some of the same concerns for that location. And but again, this was one of the top 3 properties identified during the study that could potentially have enough footprint for us to do a project there.
Ray Capacco. I wondered if we could potentially scope the discussion here a little bit. I wonder, is there anyone who is going to moderate? Because these discussions, I've been to the previous 2 meetings, and to have and without any intended, there's a lot to talk about here. But if we start going off onto whether ambulance reimbursements are going to happen, that's way beyond the scope of what we're here for today. So I wonder if anyone, I'm thinking of either our selectman or town administrator, would be willing to step in and moderate if the discussion goes off the rails.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you. I have a couple of things I'd like to say if the folks would indulge me for a moment. There's some of you will recognize where this comes from. It comes right out of the Bible. For which one of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? And I think it's crucial that the discussion be framed about what the town is actually willing and able to do. And with the moderator's indulgence, I don't know was there any intention, I had made this suggestion to the selectmen at the last meeting I was at, that they maybe poll, if there's a representative amount of people here in the audience today at this meeting, I think it does represent the town. There's a pretty good outcome here. If they would be willing to poll the audience to set some guidelines so that they know what the town would even consider. Would you mind if I did that? Okay. And Travis, yeah, it looks like you got your owl set up. You'll capture the audience, I trust, right? And so my first question would be, and I really would ask everyone to be honest, not to just be honest. Don't let anyone else's opinion of whether you raise your hand or not be a factor. Let's all be real. Let's have a real discussion here. Who in this room, by show of hands, is willing to entertain the possibility of a $30 million complex? Okay. Who would be willing to entertain a $20 million complex, whatever that looks like? By show of hands? Okay. And who would prefer to have something like somewhere in the neighborhood of a $10 million police station? Show of hands. Okay. I think that was important for the selectmen and the town administrator to see that. And it's pretty similar to what I expected to see. And so I appreciate everyone, don't, if you're for the $30 million complex, don't let anyone shame you for that. If that's your opinion, that's your opinion. And we've all learned recently that it's very important to share your opinions no matter what anyone else thinks about it. I did,
You said you asked for 30 million, and then you went down to 10. I mean, why wouldn't that go for all
I-
of them? If I can get it cheaper and cheaper, I don't know how it's going down.
I guess the point of the poll was to see what the townspeople, what the residents are willing to spend, not what you get necessarily, or what the, could we take a $30 million proposal and trim it down to 15 million? That's a different question. You're willing to spend 30, 20, or maybe 10. I should have included, is there anyone who doesn't want to do anything? Okay. I think we all agree that we at least need to do the police station, but I don't want to presume that. I'm not trying to impose my opinion or anything like that. Does that address what you were talking about? Okay. With all sincerity, I appreciate it. The first meeting, we were emphatically told there is no plan B. Unambiguous, so be it. At least at the second meeting, we are looking at a possible plan B. We moved in the right direction. And now we're being told that we're having a fluid discussion. And so, with all sincerity, thank you to the town leadership for moving in this direction. My last comment, at least for now, is what will we do going forward? Will the selectmen consider a true committee to let pertinent people who have perspectives that need to be on that committee, as well as several just residents who aren't involved in the town, to be on a committee to study going forward what we're going to do? And associated with that is that if we could consider a police station option, if we spent $50,000 on a study for a $10 million project, that's less than that's 0.5%. It's just contingency money in a project that size. And so, without advocating for the bank building, I think it would be important to at least consider it, do the study, see, and then we'll know. But I can't help but have the thought, what if we could renovate that building for $5 or $6 million? And it would satisfy what the chief and the police are looking for and save $4 million. I'd be happy to spend the $50,000 to find that out and put it to rest, so that we don't have to sit here 5 years from now, no matter what we do, thinking, well, geez, if we would have done that study, maybe we could have got in that building, for a lot cheaper. Or, as Jeff pointed out, maybe it'll cost $9 million to renovate it. And if that's the case, yeah, why renovate old? Yeah, I mean, there are some reasons to do it. If the cost was the same, there could be an argument for that, but I'm just talking financially. Yeah, but if we could do it for $6 million or $7 million versus 9 or 10, I'd say it's worth $50,000 to find that answer out. Thank you.
Okay, so just kind of a non-binding opinion poll. How many are interested in looking at the bank building? Okay. How many are interested in looking at expanding the fire station as opposed to building new? Okay, all right. So I think we have a special town meeting coming up. I think that would probably be the time to put both of those on as questions. Do you want to spend $55,000 and the $48,000 to look at these two studies that would determine the cost to renovate the bank and the cost and how exactly the fire station would be expanded?
Would there be grant money available for any of these studies?
For this, well, The grant cycle, not if we do it in November. The grant cycle's too long. Right? I mean, that's, yeah, you're talking about.
Unfortunately, a lot of grants are drying up because of the current conditions. There's no guarantee that there would be a grant available. There's no guarantee that we would get the grant. We got the grant for this study. That was commissioned almost a year and a half ago. It's a tough climate out there. Certainly, we would look for it, but there's no guarantee.
Hi, guys. Several questions here. Several questions here. First, to town administrator, how much do we have as a town in free cash available right now? Ballpark. Not going to hold you to a specific cent.
Yep, free cash is not certified yet. We're currently working on that because the year end for fiscal year 2025 just closed. So that calculation and that number will not be available until probably late October, early November.
Ballpark, though, we probably have a few $100,000 that if the town wanted to do these studies, we probably will have that available as part of the special election. We'll probably be able to afford doing the special studies.
Yeah, I would anticipate us having at least some money available to do some of this stuff.
Several questions about these special studies. First is, will that special study, if we did it on the bank building, is that going to evaluate, and I'm assuming I'm going to talk to the architecture here, that's going to also evaluate things, asbestos and any other hazardous materials that we'll have to account for, so that way we don't get any surprises if we do decide to go that route? Or is that in addition to?
So the fee does not include an inspection by a hygienist. However, after the years of doing this, I'm very good at identifying when I see something that's suspicious, and if we do, then we would recommend to the town that they do bring on board a hygienist to establish exactly what it is. Asbestos is fairly easy to identify. There are some that are a little bit more difficult to identify.
Okay. Second aspect here. So I know
just as a caveat, Jeff, those numbers do not include environmental, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Let's be abundantly clear on that.
So just the structural study.
Structural,
just
mechanical,
the bones
electrical,
of the building.
plumbing.
Doesn't include mold, doesn't include asbestos, any of the other hazardous materials that can pop up during construction and drive the budget way up.
It does not include an investigation for that work.
Okay. I wanted to make sure everyone's clear on that before we just go gung-ho on a $50,000 study. Second is there was conversation, so somebody mentioned a figure of $6 million for renovating the bank building. I want to point out that $6 million was the construction cost for doing a new police station without the firearms simulator and the fitness room. However, the town, I believe, is paying the officers to go train at independent gyms and such like that anyways, so it behooves us to have the fitness center for the officers in the building, because then if they're working out and they get a call, worst case, they can also go assist our other officers. So I do want to raise that point. The bank building doesn't, in my opinion, have enough room, that property, for a proper sally port, which was one of the big asks of the police station. And for those who don't know what a sally port is or haven't been to one of these meetings before, that's a secure area, almost like a jail, where officers can safely process a individual. Right now, the officers have to bring them up the steps, and if you had somebody who was combative, not only is that a potential hazard for the officer and the prisoner, but also any individual. So if they had who was combative, and that's 8 o'clock in the morning at Mason's, everyone going to breakfast, well, it could get into a dicey situation. We're lucky as a town that hasn't happened. This delineates that risk. So I want to call that out. Lastly, sorry, I took a few notes. Lastly, for the fire station, while the town has done excellent in my eyes as far as managing the resources that we have, If anybody's been to the basketball court, 'cause I was just there a week ago with my daughter, who was just here, it's overgrown. It's not really taken care of probably the best that it could. I don't see that that basketball court is being fully utilized, other than maybe once in a blue moon. I think that that place could be used. However, we still run into the challenge that those bays are still super small for the engines that are coming out of the manufacturers right now. So us as a town have to understand, if we stick with those bays the way they are, we are also going to be paying a lot more down the line for custom modified engines and apparatus. So if the town wants to say, okay, we're going to spend $6 million for this project, just know that's not the all-in cost. There's going to be ancillary costs down the line that will continue to build as costs go up. One last point, speaking to that, is the study timeline. So a study needs to be conducted. What is the timeline for the study? Because we won't even be able to appropriate the funds to the special election in November. So what would be the timeline for the study when we get the results? And then on top of that, what is a ballpark for when we could actually break ground? Because if we're pushing to November, then study takes a couple months. Now we're talking about fall, if not 2028, for a construction timeline, which costs will go up. Can I get that estimate? And that's my last question.
So I'm going to answer that question, but first I want to just make one comment about your bay size comment. You're right. You're very much right about the limited bay size. That is all true. The one thing we're dealing with this on another community right now, where we are able to build a couple new bays and then retain their old bays. And so a big part of that dialogue has been, okay, what's the big equipment and what's the smaller equipment? And if we do the 2 new bays, can we get your biggest equipment into those bays and then keep your smaller vehicles in the smaller bays? So that is one way to help mitigate that issue. But your points are absolutely right on. So a study like this, probably 6 months, 4 on the very shortest. But typically they run about 6 months.
So that pushes us to 2028 for a start date, essentially?
You would be...
Yeah, because we'd have to have a vote.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Maybe a vote at the ATM in 26.
Yeah. Okay. So we lose a year.
Yeah.
By doing this.
Well,
You could always have a special town meeting anytime you want.
yep. So, Jeff, oh, sorry, what?
No, I was saying let you answer the question before he pops up. Go ahead and finish answering.
Oh, sorry, okay.
So the question was, you can always do a special town, was that the question you were referring to?
Yeah, I mean, you can always have a special, sure. But I mean, in the general order of things, we have a special and an annual and a special and an annual. So. Jeff, so you mentioned one thing. So the square footage that you're using the basement as part of the square footage that would meet the police, right?
For the bank building?
For the bank building?
Yes, sir. I looked at the total
Okay.
square footage on the property card.
All right. Does anybody know, is it a dirt basement? Anybody know the condition in there? Okay. I'm just curious. I mean, if it's a dirt basement or if it's low, some basements, you're in like 4 or 5 feet of ceiling height.
Yeah, I would suggest,
that might be a big factor.
yeah, if it's a very small basement, or if it's a dirt floor, then probably the only program elements that we'd put down there is maybe, if it's suitable, mechanical, electrical, plumbing space. I think the point that was made by the gentleman about the Sally Port is something that I have scratched my head looking at the aerial photos. I believe that there's a drive-through on there. I don't know if that's well located, that I could work with that somehow. But I think it's a good point that if we do a Sally Port, that's going to be an impact on that site. So
my thought was the drive-through would become the Sally Port most likely, or maybe 2/3 of it or something like that.
yeah,
You
that's a
probably need
possibility.
the two lanes.
It would be great.
Millette, you can probably answer this better than I can, but Yeah, but,
I'm the architect, not the builder. Don't confuse me with one of those contractors.
but you'd want like probably 2 of those lanes, right? Drive in, drive out, you could have 2 cars in there at the same time, so you'd cut off the third lane as a pass-through access, right? And then
Is it
build
3
the
lanes?
salad port. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, so
Yeah,
maybe,
'cause there was
maybe you
the
could
old-
capture 2 vehicles inside, and I would love to get the cell block located in the rest of that space so that I'm not putting it on the wood floor inside the bank building. Again, I haven't looked at it. This is all just, if you present me this scenario, that's my reaction to it, but. Somebody had a hand up. Oh, there's.
Why couldn't we just have a conversation with Mr. Fountain as was suggested? He seems to know a lot about the building already.
yeah, but we still have to assess the building, whether it's going to work. There's,
Probably tell you if it's dirt floor or not.
oh, well, yeah, for the basement, yeah, yeah.
And he's already said there's no asbestos.
Yeah, but we can't, when you're buying a property, you do your own inspection.
So he's got to have gone through the right channels.
We'd still have to inspect for it. And like Jeff said, I mean, he can go through quickly and kind of get an idea, so. Yeah, I mean, we'd still have to do that.
I just got a question. I see prevailing wages up there. Is there a reason why they have to do prevailing wages? I feel like 3 times the amount of cost. How local person will come.
That is correct. You have to comply. This is a public building project. You have to comply with prevailing wage laws. That's the state law. And there's no way around it.
I believe that gentleman in the very back had his hand up.
I don't know the answer to this, but maybe you guys can. Let's say we buy a bank building, right? And we do all the improvements that we need. I was told by, I don't know if he's an engineer or what, but the state could still disapprove it, and we would be stuck with that building with the money already spent and not be able to do nothing with it. Is that true?
That would be extraordinarily unlikely. I mean, the building code is at such a point now, it's very, very prescriptive. We have a building code expert in our office, and should we do this study, and we would do the work to make sure that we're bringing it up into full compliance with the building code. And at that point, the only other thing that you've got to make sure you address is the Department of Sanitation is responsible for reviewing and inspecting detention facilities. Again, well familiar with their regulations. I've worked with them for 30 years. Never had a cell block rejected by the Department of Sanitation, but it is a hurdle that you have to go through. They have to inspect it and say, yes, your facility meets the standard.
They could say, no, you can't use that police station in the state.
No, I don't think there's. I can't imagine a scenario where you invest all of this money and they come back and say no, as long as you meet the building code, and that's the real trick. Oh yeah.
Oh, no, we're not going to do that. Because that, we're going to have to, let's say it's the bank, we do the study, the study is going to say you can do this, and we can even run that by the state, but there's no way we're going to purchase that building, put all this money into it, and then they say no. That's not going to happen. Not on my watch.
But let me also be clear, you could spend this money on the study, and the study could say, that building's not going to work.
At least it answers the question, though.
Just for clarity, I want to add a comment, and correct me if I'm mistaken. But the construction process, I think Jeff alluded to this, but just for the sake of clarity, because we know how much misinformation gets put out there, that you wouldn't buy or build a new facility. It gets inspected along the way. The whole process is inspected step by step by step. And so it's almost inconceivable that you would ever have a completed building, refurbished or new, that would not meet the state's approval.
That is correct. I mean, we typically meet during the design phase with the local inspectors, and we talk through our evaluation of the code and show them how we're complying with it on our drawings. If they have comments or feedback, we incorporate that in. The drawings are then submitted for permit, and they do another review on it. And then, if there's any comments, then we have to address it. During construction, all of the inspectors periodically inspect the work as it progresses, and if they find any shortcomings in either installation or occasionally you'll have some, an inspector say, we want one more exit sign because we can't really see that exit sign from here. That gets added in, that's part of the contingency process. But by the time you get to that point where they finally issue the certificate of substantial completion, every inspector has reviewed the building, every inspector has signed off. The architect and all of the engineers submit affidavits that the observed construction was done in accordance with the contract documents. And so you've got lots of layers of a surety, making sure that that product is delivered and is appropriate for the need.
I want to talk to using the bank building or not even bothering to do a study. That bank building is never going to do what a new building would do for the police department or the fire department. There's never going to be enough parking. The access for handicapped to that bank building is not existing right now. So it's not a level building to the ground. So I don't know what the basement is. I know there have always been steps into it. So you spend the money on a study, it might be possible to make it work, but we already tried to make the police station in the existing building work, and you can't. And you're just putting off construction by spending more money on a study on another site. I don't see the point of doing a study. I would rather at this point say, if people don't feel we can afford to spend $20,000 or $30,000, they can't afford the taxes for it, that's fine. But we could afford, I think, as a community, to just do the police station right away, to get that in construction, not to put it off with another study. The study for the fire to see if we could make that work, might make sense. But the police station on a site, and I agree that Maple Avenue probably isn't the best site, say on the Route 19 site, or the other site, would probably be the quickest solution to the police station. Right now, that police station is so inaccessible and so unusable for what you need. You're just waiting for a lawsuit. I could go and sue. I can't get into the police station. I'm in a wheelchair at least half the time. It's not accessible to me. If I had a problem, I couldn't get to the button to buzz into the police station on some days. What if I was there and I couldn't get in? And there is no cell service downtown either. Why would you put a police station in an area with a dead cell station area? Downtown is essentially a dead zone. We're just prolonging the problem. I understand that people can't afford that much more in taxes. That's fine. So we go with the $10,000 proposal. Most people here, I believe, are willing to spend the extra $300 a year to fix that one problem. And maybe we could do a shorter term loan and do a five-year bond and look at paybacks for some things. That's a lot of it. We're paying so much interest when you go 20 or 30 years. You want to go shorter years. I've been involved in other projects. I was on the town council in Southbridge for years before we moved here. And spending on a building that's not adequate just never works. And making something work, if that was a temporary solution while you were waiting for a new station to be built and it was going to cost you $50,000, that would make sense if it was a safer building for the police right now. It's just not going to work. And we need to do something quickly.
Yeah, thank you for those points. So the bank building is a lovely building. You can help me out here. It will change if it becomes a police station. I don't think any of those windows are going to stay. I mean, what are the implications of taking the bank building and turning it into a real risk level 4 police station, right? What's,
All right, you're putting me, we're going out on
I know.
thin ice out here, so, don't write me letters because we're hypothetical talking here.
Yeah.
I mean, number one, I think that we've got to look at the ADA issues. If we touch more than 50% of the floor plate, if we renovate more than 50% of the building, then we're a level 3 alteration, which nearly brings us into full compliance with the building code. Risk category is another discussion altogether. But once I do that, ADA is in play.
I think we have to have it
now
ADA.
I have to think, do I have vertical access vis-a-vis an elevator or some other means? Do I have an accessible front door vis-a-vis a ramp or whatever I need to do to get there? Do I have accessible bathrooms? If I don't have accessible bathrooms, making accessible bathrooms takes up more square footage. We probably have that covered in the program because the program plans for accessible bathrooms. So that's the first question. The second one is, can I use the basement? And as you pointed out, I don't know yet, maybe. What can I use it for? How do I do the sally port? How do I do the detention area? Because you don't do wood frame construction in detention areas. That's usually concrete or masonry. And then how do I protect the envelope reasonably? The good news is, I always say, I've said this for 20 years, brick is the first best choice for the exterior of a police station because it's low maintenance and it has intrinsic ballistic resistance. Windows, however, are not intrinsically ballistic resistant. Now, there's no code that says what level of ballistic resistance is required, but there is best practice, and that would be a discussion that we would have with the police department about what's appropriate for your community. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. Police stations have much more complex mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. You need separate systems for the cell block area and separate ventilation for your sally port. You also need separate ventilation for your public areas so nobody can introduce anything bad through the air system. So my gut says you would probably do a substantial renovation of your HVAC system. If there's a boiler that's in great shape, we would absolutely reuse it. If there's a generator, which is required for a police station that's in great shape and able to carry the capacity, we would absolutely reuse it. I don't know if the building has a vault. If it does, maybe there's an opportunity for me to do something with that.
The vault was sold.
Okay. So, I mean, those are the things that I need to understand. Obviously, my structural engineers are going to go and make sure that all of the framing has the capacity for the required loads. If it doesn't, it's probably not a big deal to upgrade it. You can sister joist and things like that. It is wood frame construction. It's a little bit easier to work with. As far as the essential service facility requirements, that's all about the lateral loading of the building. So everybody knows that buildings push weight down this way, but wind and stuff likes to make buildings do this. So essential services facility need a little bit more resistance for that. Honestly, in a wood frame building, that means we are going to have to create some, here we go, architectural term, shear walls. What that means is we'll do a little extra framing and a lot of extra plywood to create the resistance of that horizontal. So those are all of the things that we'll look at as we look at that bank building to make sure that when we come out the other end, that it is in fact a good police station. It's still going to be multi-floor, which is unusual for a smaller police station, but because you end up using square footage for vertical circulation and for elevators and things like that, and usually it's not cost effective. However, you've got an existing building envelope, so it might offset. We also got to check to make sure the roof is sound and that it's got a lifespan on it. I don't know when the last roof went on that building. It might have been last year. It might have been 30 years ago. I don't know. So, okay, that's all the things I would, that's my initial checklist. I think I got the checklist ready for the study here.
All right, so just so you know, it could be a vastly different looking building when it's done. Anybody else?
Now, nobody's really answered my question here, but is there a way that we can get Adam and Jerry what they want, but at a lower cost? It might not be perfect what they want, but it still would be good. a study on that to see how we can get the cost down and give these guys both the room that they need to operate. Well, somewhat the room. I mean, a couple things I think they could probably give up.
One of the options is to do a police station with some renovations or addition to the existing Station A. That's trying to balance both the needs.
Building there with a highway department. That's a good place. I think that's the best. If we're going to build anything, I think that's the best place to put it.
Okay.
But can we get the price down to maybe 15 million there and give both these guys what they want? Is it possible? I don't know. I'm not a construction man. I'm asking you guys. But I think that the bank there is a waste of our time and money. I think over there with the town, I call it the town environment, the highway department, that is the best place to put it. So we just got to come pouring out there in the fire trucks. The traffic ain't that bad, so we don't have to worry about accidents. You know, there's not many houses around it, so you're not going to affect the neighborhood too bad.
So you're,
If we can all work together as a team, I think we can give these two men what they want and need at a reasonable cost. I don't know if you agree, or maybe somebody say, throw this guy out of here. Well, whatever, but I'm giving you my opinion.
okay, so you're interested in a public safety complex, both of them,
But if we can get the price,
but at like half the price of the most,
do you think
okay?
it's done for 15 million? Or?
I don't know, you know, we can sit down and hash that out.
The answer is no. The answer is no.
Being honest with you, right?
Yeah.
Because I like to see these two guys get what they want.
Yeah.
Because they save lives.
The answer is no.
Yeah.
Getting the cost down to $15 million on a combined public safety complex is not feasible. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Just for some more clarification, we've all seen lots of posts on Facebook. Some of them are just insane. There was a follow-up post recently. I'll keep the names out of it, but who accurately said that even the worst case scenario, the $30 million concept, would only increase your taxes at the most 21% over what they are right now today. That's only for this facility, the $30 million proposed facility. That would be the worst case. So anyone who's telling you that your taxes are going to go up $12,000 or other crazy numbers, just ignore it. You don't have to argue with them. They clearly don't know what they're talking about, so just dismiss it. If we did a $9 million project, again, depending on the interest rate and the duration, but based on I believe I used the same numbers that Ben used. The $9 million project, your taxes would go up 6.33%. So that's the range you'd be looking at. Again, on the unlikely prospect that we can do something for much less than $9 million, which I hope we can, but let's just go with that number for the sake of discussion. So your taxes are going to go up if we pursue this, either a police station or a complex, between 6% and 21%. And just one last piece of information: the town's per capita income is, according to the Department of Revenue, is $25,322. For someone who is just a single person in a $290,000 home, which is the examples that were being used today, with a $30,000 income, their current taxes are 12.33% of that income. Their new taxes would be a little bit more, almost 1% more, at 13.2% of their income. If you're making $50,000, it's 7.5% of your income right now, and it would go up to 8% of your income. That's for a $9 million project. Of course, a $30 million project or a $20 million project would be commensurate more but just to put it into some perspective, obviously, there's many of us in this room that are probably making their household that does have more than $50,000 of income. And so your mileage may vary, but again, my concern is for the typical resident in town who doesn't have much means, that all these decisions have to be weighed against that. And I'll go back to the quote I said at the beginning. You have to live within your means. You have to count the cost, and you have to take that into real consideration, above and beyond exercise rooms and that kind of stuff. Thank you.
Adam, I don't want to put you on the spot. I just want to ask a question. Let's just say that this facility is next to the town barn, highway department. When you're coming out to answer a call, and I live on Maple Street, how are you going to get to, say, an emergency that's in West Warren? You're going to go down Bridge Street and make the sharp turn, go over the rail bridge into West Warren that way? Or are you going to, I don't know how you're going to make it past my house, down the hill, and under the underpass, around the roundabout that we got, to go to West Warren. I mean, it seems like it's a good place to have it. I agree. But how are the engines going to get out of there?
Wouldn't you go the other way, past the high school, past the elementary school, past the dump?
You could try it that way too, but
We would have several options. It would depend on where the call was. I mean, we have, the ability to go down Reed Street to Crouch Road. We have the ability to go down Bridge Street, which our apparatus does now. We go on calls now. So, I mean, obviously, it's a little different coming off of Main Street. Personally, I think out of the three options, I think that Brimfield Road, in my opinion, is the best location for that. I think it's the cheaper location. I think it doesn't require any acquisition of other property, which is also very advantageous for that. So, I mean, I am in favor of that, and believe me, I think a lot of good points have been raised today, regardless of whether we do a combination project here, I think it is important that, I'm all for both of these studies personally, in some ways. And I mean, because I know the bank building is a very hot topic. It is a privately owned building. We do have to keep that in mind, okay? It is a privately owned building, which we'd be putting taxpayer funds towards a privately owned building to do the study, okay? That being said, I think it very well could be worth it to dispel any ideas that it could or could not work. I think that's the only way you're going to get it done. So if, that's fine. I have no problem having the taxpayers vote on making that decision because they want those questions answered. That's absolutely everybody's right. But I would strongly encourage you to also do the study on the fire station as well, because that's the only way you're going to get those answers. That's the only way you're going to decide whether or not, okay, we do a police station now, at least we know what's going to cost us maybe down the road for something else. I will say, as I've said in the other two meetings, the only caution I would put forward is that with these taxes going up, if you do one project now, what are the chances of you actually doing the other project 10 years from now? Okay, because when someone is absorbing a 20 or 30-year increase in their taxes, what are the chances of them saying, do it again in 10 years? Okay, we have to understand that. We have to think about that. So if we just do one, if that's the prerogative that the town wants to do, so be it. But just understand the other one may never come to fruition. Okay, so we have to be smart about it. We have to look at all the options and really understand where we're going to put our money in. I'm a taxpayer just like every single person here. I have a child in the system. I have as much interest in keeping this project cost down just like everyone else in this room, believe me. Okay, and just to clarify one thing, we are all cutting fitness rooms and stuff. Again, this was the study that was done for a modern day police and fire station of what is acceptable. You got to understand this line of work is riddled with cancer related causes. It's riddled with back pains and everything else, from lifting and carrying people all day long, dealing with incarcerated folks that in and out of cruisers all day long. Okay, there's a huge encouragement for police and firefighters to remain fit because does the citizens better. You know, it's better for them to stay healthy and everything. So these are what modern day complexes have. It's not what myself and Chief Millette want. Okay, it has nothing to do with, okay, we just want this. These are what are typically in modern buildings now that they build them, and there are reasons for that. Most of it is related to the health and safety of the employees that work in the building, to stay in shape, keep their gear clean, especially fire departments. You know, cancer is the number one concern right now in the fire service. Tons and tons of firefighters, you know, are diagnosed with cancer during the job or right after they retire. It's a huge hot topic button. That's why there's so much push to have decontamination, facilities to wash and clean the turnout gear, not bringing it into the same places where they're eating their dinner, which is exactly what we're doing now, okay, because we don't have those kind of spaces. So everything is combined. So all of those are factors that, you know, I really want you folks to understand. That's why that planning goes into place in these modern day complexes. That's all. It's not about what we just feel like wanting, okay? I just want to clear that up. These are designed very, very specifically for the health and safety of those employees. Thank you.
Any other final questions or final comments? Okay. Where we're going from here, folks, if you have any other comments or concerns or anything that you'd like that maybe you think of, you know, tomorrow or the next day or the next week, please email them to me, and I'll make sure that they get to the selectmen for their review. And please, we will have some further announcements about this process in the near future at a selectmen's meeting. Thank you very much for coming here this afternoon.